Welcome into another edition or it's actually the last edition of the Scoop Live. I'll tell you
People are gonna
why.
get scared when you saying that.
Yeah, it is the last edition of the name, the Scoop Live. We will be under a new moniker. Shout out to our guru of everything, Michelle Hillison. She will be knocking out some great graphics. We'll have a new name next week and going forward. But I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Don Callahan. Thank you for those of you that have chosen to spend your Wednesday at noon with us on the Scoop Live. Sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Don, normally we have a pregame talk and we map out what we're going to talk about. But as I said earlier, it's my birthday today. And no, I'm not 63 years old like Joey Powell had to post on Twitter and defame me, even though I'd look pretty strong for 63. Not there yet. May 10th is my birthday, and I was outside getting a cake from a
That's
friend of
right.
mine that surprised me. So, no pregame speech done. So, getting into this right now, we want to talk about your most recent or your first mock class of 2024, the 2024
Well,
recruiting class for North Carolina football.
well, can we before we got to talk about we got a top five that's going to be at the end of this.
Yeah. Am
Was
I the host or you the host? Would
what
you prefer to be the host?
I just with your old age, you've already become forgetful, and we got an MVP that we got to honor.
Okay, here's what we do. We're going to talk mock class. We're going to honor last week's chat MVP. Shout out to whoever that may be. We'll release that later. And we're going to do top 5 actors that we talked about at the end of last show. And Scott Dawson, if you need somebody to Airbnb out at the Outer Banks, feel free to send the information, my friend. He is on the Outer Banks watching us. I'm sure it's beautiful out there. It's certainly beautiful
He
around
should
these parts.
invite you to wherever he's staying at since it's your birthday.
Yeah, I'll be glad to do this show from the porch of a cottage on the beach somewhere. I'll be glad to. We'll do it there. We'll be the traveling circus that is Don and Tommy. Let's get into it. So we've covered it. Mock class, top
Mm-hmm.
5 actors to end. We're gonna honor our chat MVP
Well, let's honor the chat MVP, Alan
today.
Minton. Yeah, right
Alan.
now. Well,
Okay.
last week was Alan Minton. So thank you, Alan, for your participation last week. It was appreciated, and so I'm dedicating this podcast to Alan. So Alan, is Alan even in here?
I am sure that Alan will be around. If he's not, he will certainly hear this.
Okay.
And Don is dedicating the chat, so better be a good one, Don. When you start dedicating stuff to people,
All right.
you can't like dedicate a tree in a garden to somebody. It's got to be a major podcast, especially if you look at the chat now. We got Boss Man, El Jefe, El Presidente in the chat too, watching us.
The wise and powerful Buck Sanders.
Yeah, so we're going to shout out Johnny T-Shirt, and we're going to get into it. Don, your mock class threads on Tar Pit Premium message boards over the years have been probably the most popular, most controversial, most talked about, most commented on threads there.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, or I guess yesterday, you released Mock 1.0 for the 2024 class. Now, before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, and folks on the Tar Pit Premium message board need to check it out. We're not going to talk about it person for person or player for player on here because it is premium content, though I do find it interesting that premium content from Inside Carolina winds up as other content on Twitter and other social media. But we're not doing that here. We're
Or other
staying
websites.
on other websites. So we're
But
staying
comment.
faithful to the cause. So check it out if you haven't read it. It's right above at the moment the thread for this show. But Don, the origins of the mock class and how you got started in that, and then I want to ask you about the process of getting there. But go.
Yeah. So I have actually to better cover recruiting for my own purposes. I've been doing a mock class, my own personal mock class for years. I believe it started early in Fedora's tenure. Maybe it was a little bit before that, but I always just had a mock class up. I'm a big. Have you ever heard of Google Keep?
I think so, but you can tell
Okay.
me about it.
It's just like a notepad sort of thing. It syncs. It's great. My wife and I use it for the grocery list. So, like she could be on the road heading to the grocery store and I can send her a message like, Tommy was here, used all the toilet paper. So we need some toilet paper, add that to the list sort of thing. Anyway, so I always have a Google Keep up. The first, note, is my mock class with all the positions and all my projections. I've been forever updating it. When I get new information, when I talk to somebody, if some sort of thought arises, that sort of thing. And then I guess midway through Fedora's tenure, Ben and I were talking about different ideas, Ben Sherman, that is, and I came out with that, just kind of using that as an idea. We knew it was going to cause some pushback, and you're always worried about, unintended consequences. But for the most part, there's been a lot of positive feedback on it, and I think people want it more frequently. But we try to keep it special.
So you released this first one on May 9th. Signing
Mm-hmm.
day is what, December 20th, something. First
Mm-hmm.
signing day. So roughly 7 months out. Why now for Mock 1.0? And obviously there's plenty of commits, especially since Mac Brown's been at North Carolina. The commits come earlier and earlier. He wants to lock up a class as soon as possible. But why in May? And why not start it a little bit later in the summer after camps have shaken out and all that?
So I wanted to release it after I finished the position by position recruiting board breakdown, just because it kind of gave people a good starting point. So everyone was familiar. If you read those, you're familiar with just the pool of targets at each position. Obviously, the earlier ones are a little bit out of date. I did the defensive back one, the last one, last week. But also, we're at the point in the cycle where we have a good amount of information. We probably, to be honest, in a vacuum, I had enough information probably like a month or more ago to do the first one, but we had a lot of other stuff that we wanted to put into the weekly scoops. But I definitely want to get it done, at least the first one. I'd love to get at least 2 done. That's probably not going to happen before June, because June is when a lot of things get rocking and rolling with the official visits.
So when you look at it, you put this one out, and I meant to tell you beforehand, but we said we weren't going to talk before the show. What is the best percentage hit rate on Mox 1.0 that you've ever had?
Oh, that's something I'd have to look back on. I know that, I don't know if it was last year or the year before. I think it was last year. There was a couple of people who kind of attacked me a little bit on just my projections. And Ben Sherman, my hero, came to my rescue and actually went back and looked at the last couple and kind of laid it out there. And my hit rate was actually, a number that I was definitely proud of. I can't remember exactly what it was. He posted it on the message board. I'm sure we could find it if we really dig, but it's definitely something I need to look back on. I can tell you though that, a lot of work goes into it, and a lot of people with a lot of knowledge about what's going on are consulted to help me put this together. So I'm not just picking names out of a hat with a lot of these things. Now, the caveat always is that there's a very good chance North Carolina is going to offer additional players. And how in the world can I consider them for the mock class if I don't even know if North Carolina is going to offer them or not? We're dealing with high school teenagers. You know what it's like with teenage boys. They're all a little bit all over the place. A lot of things can happen. Schools can drop kids, and all of a sudden they become options for North Carolina. North Carolina could drop a kid that they were. There's so many different things that can happen between now and February.
What's the craziest thing you've heard from a message board poster directed towards you when you drop this stuff?
I think it's just
other than go back to Philadelphia and pull for the Flyers.
Everybody's always been nice. No one has ever told me to go back to Philadelphia. I don't know if Philadelphia wants me back. But it's just usually it's like everything else with, when a story from an outside source is posted on Inside Carolina, you can always tell by the headline whether that story is pro UNC or against UNC based off of what that poster had it posted. Because obviously if it's pro UNC, it's the greatest story ever. If it's against UNC, then this writer doesn't know what they're talking about. It's kind of sort of the same thing. If I don't project somebody in the mock class that the poster is hopeful would be a part of this class, then I'm going to get dogged a little bit. And it is what it is. But like I said, I mean, I'm definitely not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. I'm trying to get the projections correct. And, and that's my goal with it. But yeah, it's just usually just pushback on somebody who's not included and telling me, oh, well, you wait, they're going to sign with North Carolina, sort of thing. And there's been times where I've been wrong, so it happens.
Yeah, I mean, you're never wrong if you don't put an opinion out there or
That's
make
right.
a choice. And,
That's right.
You know what I've always said about squirrels and all, you got to make a decision. And if you don't, you end up flat in the road.
That's right.
You're good at putting them together. What's the hardest part about doing this other than the nature of teenage athletes? I mean, clearly you include all of Carolina commits on there,
Yeah.
which ultimately that can change.
Yeah.
But what's the biggest challenge this day and age? We talked about a couple weeks ago. We talked about the official visit deal and how
Mhm.
now they're unlimited. Those schools like Carolina are still limited by the number they can give, but guys can go on official visits, forever these days from a player standpoint. Does that make this stuff harder for you? I think.
Yeah, I think for me the hardest part comes into situations where I'm like, all right, UNC needs I know UNC is targeting, let's say hypothetically, 4 DBs. They have one committed. I'm completely making this up because obviously UNC has 2 committed. One committed. There's 2 guys that UNC is a really good spot with. And then there's like no clear guy for that 4th spot, but there's like 3 guys who have not visited, have expressed a desire to visit. They're further away. They're all either in Georgia or Florida. How do I make that determination? So there's a lot of times where I'm just like, I am kind of just, reading what I can to figure out how to throw, who to put in there. That sort of thing can be difficult. Or I think specific to this most recent one, there were a couple, I guess, bringing it back to the DB. I mean, there were a couple different, or let me just go to linebacker, for example. Okay. So linebacker, we have 1 committed. North Carolina will take they could take, well, they want to take at least 1, but they're willing to take 2, right? And just that willingness to take a second one further complicates the situation that I'm in. And then if we're looking at the candidates, there's 3. There's Bodie Calhoun, linebacker from Northern Virginia. There's Ashton Woods, linebacker from Georgia. And there's Cruz Law, who is a linebacker from Tennessee. All 3 guys have visited North Carolina at least once, maybe twice this offseason. All 3 have official visits scheduled for June, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each one has different connections. Some of them have friends who are committed there. Some of them have friends on the team, that sort of thing. And so I got to make a call on, do I want to take 2 of those guys, project 2 of those guys? Which 2 are they going to be? Am I just going to go with 1? Which one is it going to be? I went with, just to kind of throw it out there, Cruz Law. But it would not shock me if it's Ashton Woods. It would not shock me if Bodie Calhoun commits in early June, and then, Cruz Law commits at the end of June, and then, and they're done. I mean, there's just so many different scenarios to play out. And that's kind of the fun part of this.
So how many offers, ballpark the number of offers that Carolina has on the table at this time of year?
Are you talking about offers? So there's guys that have actually offered, or guys that that UNC has offered and is in play for?
How many? Let's start from the top. Total number of offers out, roughly, that North Carolina has on the table, in play or out of play,
All right. So
whatever, but they've offered.
I'm trying to actually do this. I know this is not great radio, so or whatever this is. Pi 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So, God, we're talking probably about. Let me just do this math real quick.
Looking at, I'll help you while you're doing that. Looking at your linebackers only, and another great resource that folks often overlook, I know I do at times, is your football recruiting board. That is on the message board. It's the bottom pin thread on the message board. That is the primo spot to go for football recruiting information. You can see everything we're talking about here. You can see everything referenced. You know, Don even does it up with little fancy icons signifying whether they've been to a game or visiting somewhere else or attending camp. But go there, and then you've got your commits, and then you've got position by position breakdown for whatever class you want to look at. And one of the interesting parts of that is Don continues to do the math, and I'll freely admit, if I had
I'm good now, but go ahead. I just wanted you to
what,
finish.
well, you've got it, each position is broken down. So I'll just refer to the linebackers so folks will know. You got the scholarship count, where it breaks down the scholarships for everybody currently on the team, when they'll be gone, or when they're expected to be gone. And then you've got prospects with North Carolina offers, and you mentioned these guys. You mentioned, you know, Cahoon, Woods, Cruz Law. Great name, by the way, Cruz Law. I mean, that he's got two last names. You can't go wrong with two last names. Two first names are trouble.
Yeah.
Which is what I have. But anyway, you've got those, and then you've got down at the bottom maybe guys that aren't offered, prospects that are offered that are not listing North Carolina, and then committed elsewhere. So just a wealth of information, just position by position there. So back to the question, as I've stalled long enough, how many offers, active offers, does North Carolina have out
So
on their class of 24?
I estimate, we'll say 135 that they have sent out. It's actually more than that, but it's about 135. Now, if we go and we just exclude everybody who's committed elsewhere, guys who have eliminated North Carolina, that brings, and this is not uncommon. This is, well, I shouldn't say, yeah. I mean, for the most part, a lot of programs there's programs that offer way more than this. I mean, I would guess that like South Carolina and Tennessee, offer way more, probably closer to 300, if not higher. But as far as like the actual pool of guys that UNC is legitimately still involved with, still talking to, we're down to 38 right now.
So 38 active offers.
Oh, actually, you know what? Yeah, and that excludes. Actually, you know what, man?
We'll say ish. That covers it. If we say
Yeah.
I mean, nothing's absolute. But let me ask you this question here. Define committable and non-committable offers, because that is a huge thing discussed on the message boards. And if Tennessee and South Carolina or whoever else you want to talk about offers 300 kids, clearly they're not going to take that many. They can't. So what does it mean to have an offer versus what does it mean to have an offer but it's not committable? Like, we want you, but not quite yet, because we want you, Tommy, but we prefer Don at this position. We're going to wait and see what Don does.
Yeah. Let me those number. Well, the last number I gave you is probably wrong. I think it's actually closer to maybe closer by 50 or 60 of guys at UNC, including UNC commits. The other one number was not including UNC. Anyway, all right. So committable and non-committable. So, basically whether you can commit or not. And so the thing is that, and this is not. So if you give an offer, if an offer is given to a kid, that offer might not be live forever for a lot of different reasons. It could be additional information was found out academic wise. Usually UNC does a really good job of vetting that stuff beforehand, so they're not sending out offers to guys that they don't intend on taking commitments from. I mean, you have a limited amount of spots that you want to take at a particular position, but I think the rule of thumb a lot of people use is 4 offers per spot. I think North Carolina does, less than that. But so let's say that you want, I mean, we're looking at the situation, we brought up the linebacker situation. This is a smaller scale version, but they want, 1 to 2 more guys. Well, they have 3 that they're recruiting. Now, there's a lot of different situations where the number is much larger than that. So obviously, if Cahoon and Cruz Law committed today, then Ashton Wood's offer would likely be uncommittable, sort of thing. And that's what happens with that. So now,
And this is not Carolina specific. I mean, this
no,
is
no, no. And
this is
so,
everywhere in
yeah,
every
and
sport.
and and a lot of other. So the thing is, a lot of other programs are a lot more careless with the offers. There's a lot of programs that will offer a kid because they know it will entice them to visit. And then once they visit, that's when they kind of make their decision, sort of thing. North Carolina tries to avoid that. And North Carolina is extra specially careful with in-state kids. And that's why some fans might get I guess a little irritated that an in-state kid, it took them so long to offer an in-state kid. But they don't want to burn any bridges. They want to make sure that all their I's are dotted and T's are crossed, sort of thing, before they offer a kid, because the last thing they want is to have to pull that offer or make it uncommittable, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You see it, and this is always the debate that's interesting to me. And then we'll get off this topic. Is so and so is offered by, we'll say, Georgia, Alabama, whatever, and they commit somewhere else, whether it's North Carolina or even NC State or another school, and then fans of said school say, "Oh, well, they won that recruiting battle over such and such school," and then members of that school say, "Well, that offer wasn't even committable. They
Yeah,
didn't really want him anyway." So
yeah,
it's always a debate. It is interesting to me though, the management of it, and I know North Carolina, Patrick Sotis at Carolina, and everybody else on Mac's staff. It is a complete organization type deal where they have to keep up with all that and make it work and make it fit within the guidelines and do it in some way. And I don't like to say the Carolina way or the right way or whatever, but do it in the way that suits the staff and suits everybody in the Keenan Football Center. And then guys like Don Callahan have to follow it and keep
yeah.
up with it and do an excellent job. Let me ask you about your mock class specifically. Clearly, you've got the recruits in there. Don't want to spoil it for everybody. They can go check it out. But if I'm looking at this mock class, and I understand the discussions. Some people have looked at it and said that, it lacks star power or whatever. But of all the people that you've mocked to this draft or to mock to UNC that aren't already committed, give me 1 or 2 of the biggest names on there that perhaps folks in 2 or 3 years will be extremely pleased that committed to North Carolina and attended North Carolina.
Well, the number one guy is Alex Taylor. And that's the one I probably feel the least confident about. And I talked about this in the scoop, and it's a battle with Clemson, and NC State's in there too. It's going to come down to those 3 schools. I think if he doesn't go to Clemson, it will be North Carolina. But I'm not going to rule out NC State at all. I know that that's what some of the fans probably would like for me to do. But my thinking is that the order is Clemson, North Carolina at this point. And I think, and this goes into a little bit of, I'm not only projecting Taylor, but I got to project kind of what transpires, in talking to some people. Taylor is not number 1 on Clemson's receiver board. Taylor might be North Carolina's number 1 recruit overall. He's certainly up there for sure. So I wonder how much of that eventually kind of plays into this. And then also, Clemson, they're recruiting a lot of big time receivers. And if those guys jump in the boat before Taylor, we're talking about uncommittable offers, and that could make Taylor's Clemson offer uncommittable, which makes this a UNC NC State battle. And as I kind of said, I like North Carolina's chances in that situation.
When you look, and this is an interesting dynamic, right? Because everybody listening to this remembers Trenton Simpson,
Yeah.
and he was all but gift wrapped to North Carolina
Basically,
Mac and
basically committed.
yeah, Mac and crew did everything possible to get this guy to Chapel Hill. He was not number one on Clemson's board.
No.
He was not, not anywhere. Very similar situation. I think Trenton Simpson's probably certainly better than Alex Taylor, relatively speaking. How big a deal is it for guys to not be that high on somebody's recruiting board, but it still be a school that they'd like to go to? I mean, it seems to me I'm not going to be your second fiddle, right? If you don't want me today, then I'm not going to you tomorrow when you lose out.
Well, but let's take this example. So let's just say you're graduating high school, right? Graduating high school, you get accepted to NC State, but you get put on the waiting list at North Carolina.
Okay.
What do you do? And then what if, I don't know, close to the time where you have to make a decision, UNC says, "Hey, we got a spot for you." What?
That's certainly a valid discussion. And my old self now would probably tell Carolina to stick it. But as a high school guy, I certainly
Yeah,
see your point.
yeah,
And that's what happens a lot. I mean, that's what happened with Trenton.
yeah.
And so that's the situation
It
that North
definitely no,
Carolina's.
but to your point, there are definitely are situations where the schools who quote unquote believed in the kid first are the ones who get benefits from that. There are
Mhm.
definitely recruits who will stick to that school, give them the first offer, and that school definitely has the advantage, and obviously can build a little bit of a lead. And there have been situations, I think, looking at what's his name, Kevin Concepcion last class, North Carolina, NC State offered him, I think it was like 6 months before UNC, and I know he really wanted a UNC offer really, really bad. Got the offer. He admitted that when UNC offered that, hey, he was a little pissed off about it. And I think that played a factor. Now, there's some other things too that were in there with KC and NC State, but I do think that, to your point, that does happen where, you being the second choice impacts things. Now with Taylor, I don't know. This doesn't really apply to Taylor. I know that you're not really applying to Taylor, but yeah, I mean, and for Trenton Simpson, obviously it didn't matter because if I remember correctly, he went and visited Clemson the weekend before the December signing period, and that's when they offered.
Mhm.
And the weekend prior, he had, I believe, officially visited North Carolina and had basically committed to the Tar Heels.
When you
So
look at early offers, and a lot of these offers in this current class are early. Um, we've talked about guys committed that the quarterback Merdinger and guys like that don't have a ton of other offers or high level offers at the time. How important is it to be first or one of the first?
I think if in a vacuum, it definitely is beneficial, which is why we have so many uncommittable offers, because a lot of these schools love to offer these kids super early on, especially if they're out of state. South Carolina does this, where they'll offer a North Carolina kid really, really, really early. And if that kid continues to progress the way they think, they'll continue to recruit them. But if that kid hasn't, his body doesn't mature like it's supposed to, or whatever it may be, they'll just stop talking to him, sort of thing. That definitely happens. So yeah. So I mean, I think in a vacuum, it does help you if you are the first one to offer.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, somebody's got to be first. And so, last question about this, and then we'll take a break, talk about Johnny T-shirt. But how does, and obviously this varies, and it probably varies largely depending on how good or how projectedly good the player is supposed to be. But somebody commits to a school early, say in their junior year, or whatever's going on now for the 2024 class. How does that affect future offers from other schools or school and use North Carolina, if you can and can do it accurately. I mean, Joe linebacker commits somewhere else his junior year. he's committed. He says all the right things. Oh, we actually could probably use a linebacker from the not too distant past. But anyway, and then other schools either back off and don't go after them, or they pursue them. I mean, that all depends on how good the guy is, right?
Yeah.
And how does North Carolina approach or other schools approach committed guys when it comes to dishing out later offers?
So it depends on the situation. UNC offered a bunch of ECU commits and landed all of them. So obviously, I think really it comes down to the recruit. It's kind of like when you're dating a girl, if she's making herself known that she's available, other guys are going to kind of swoop in and try to talk to her, and she has a choice of saying, hey, no, I'm taken, or yeah, let's go get some ice cream. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah.
what happens with recruits too. It's kind of on the recruit. I mean, no coach is going to continue to pursue a recruit who says, hey, I'm not interested, I'm committed. You know what I mean? Or you just stop answering your phone, stop responding to text messages. The coach is going to realize that they're wasting their time. You know what I mean? So I think it really kind of is on the recruit. North Carolina, I think every school is just going to recruit whoever is truly not committed, whether they are committed on their 24/7 profile or not. And so if a kid is kind of put it out there like, hey, I'm going to listen, then I think North Carolina's going to recruit them. And I think that's the way you got to go about it. And I think every other school is going to take that approach, if not a more aggressive approach.
What's the one thing a committed recruit can do to get people to leave them alone? Is that even possible in this day and
I
age?
think I think, well, you tell your high school coach, because your high school coach in a lot of instances is the first first line of communication. You tell your high school coach and put it out on social media. Hey, I'm firmly committed. Appreciate any sort of inquiries, but I'm committed to North Carolina, and that's where I'm gonna be.
It's an interesting take. Yeah, I couldn't imagine these guys getting multiple phone calls, text calls all the time from different guys. And I know a lot of recruits talk about they wanted to commit and get it over with, and it just doesn't always work that way. Especially if you're posting pretty pictures on social media, you're going to get callbacks, and people continue to be interested. Buck Sanders says, "Shout out to the haircut, Don." Buck, I have a haircut.
This is fresh haircut,
You
and I, I don't know if I can show
you're
you.
starting to gray up all around now. I mean,
Do
you're
I
not
have
going to have the.
the skunk patch? Well, you know what the skunk patch is from, right?
It's a birthmark, right?
No, I run really fast,
Oh,
and so I made that. I accidentally dipped my head down, and you know,
I've seen you run, and I saw you jog across the field on that open practice. It would take you running through a wall of wet paint to get that on your head. Or let's talk about Johnny T-shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com, sponsors of the podcast, sponsors of Inside Carolina, and great friends of Inside Carolina Premium subscribers. Go visit them on Franklin Street. The students and all are moving out of Chapel Hill. So if you're in town, whether it's for the NC State baseball series, which will be huge this weekend, or if you're just up there summer visiting with your family, make sure you go by there and pick up some swag for Johnny T-shirt and support them in store on East Franklin Street, or support them online. They'll deliver it straight to your door. They are the nicest folks you can imagine, and they certainly will treat you right. And you tell them you part of Inside Carolina, and you give them the code. You can get on the message boards, and they'll give you 10% off. Can't beat it. Free money. Nobody turns down free money. Never. And 10% off is certainly free money if you're a member of Inside Carolina Premium Message Boards. National people will pay the bills on the audio side. This is The Scoop with Don Callahan and Tommy Ashley. All right, Don, let's move. Anything left on your scoop?
well, why don't we? Well, this reminder: top 5.
I'm ready to get to it.
Top 5 actors,
Top 5
and
actors.
that this podcast is dedicated to
Alan Minton.
Alan Minton, and Alan is still not here. Is he not?
I haven't seen him yet.
Yeah,
I see Mark Kenton, and he says, "Happy birthday, DC." Mark, it's my birthday. It's not Don's. He's had his day. Let me throw up a couple of these chats. Okay,
yeah.
these
Let's get to
questions from the
questions.
chat.
Yep.
Preston from Greensboro, a regular, a Preston, if you had a place in the Outer Banks, I'd go see you as well. Don, do you get more accurate vibes in general from players themselves or coaches or family members? You talk to a ton of people, a ton of circles when you're dealing with these recruits. Who gives you the best vibes and the most honest vibes?
So that's a really, really, really good question. I would say, and obviously it's a case by case, but in general, coaches are usually pretty honest. Now, obviously, it's all off the record, but they're usually pretty honest. And then I would say second would be the parents, and then the players. Some of them will just be like, "Hey, this is between you and I," but a lot of them really are secretive, kind of keep stuff quiet, sort of thing. And even some of them are, they're just so they don't want to let the cat out of the bag at all. So they're very, very careful with any sort of feelings that they have. But parents usually are pretty much like, hey, yeah, we're feeling good about North Carolina or whatever. But the high school coaches are usually like, all right, here's the real schools that are involved here, so that you know.
Second question, Bodie Cahoon's. Whoops, let's get it up here. Tyler Woods, does Cahoon's ties to lacrosse coach help North Carolina, or is he headed elsewhere? I would assume that any familiarity, unless there's some negative version of that or bad taste in somebody's mouth, certainly helps whichever school is recruiting whichever recruit. Is that the case here in
Yeah,
Bodie's?
absolutely. Yeah, and his intentions are to at least try to play both sports, but he understands that it's probably not going to happen. So he's pretty realistic about that. But the lacrosse angle will certainly play a role in it. And like I said, I mean, any combination of those three linebackers would not shock me at all for North Carolina. And Bodie's going to get a great chance because he has his official visit early in the month, in early June. I haven't seen whether he had the official visit scheduled elsewhere. He has some stiff competition. He's committed to Ohio State for lacrosse, although I don't think they're recruiting him for football, which probably excludes them. Notre Dame is really in there. I think Notre Dame kind of intrigues me. That's what kind of made me hesitant to put him in there. He's visited Notre Dame a couple of different times, including most recently. And I'm and we'll talk about this on an upcoming podcast, but I'm really big on the layouts of or how the official visits fall. And I feel like for most recruitments, you want to kind of get that last weekend is most beneficial. Now, some kids where you kind of feel like they're done with the process, they want to get it over with. You want to kind of get one of the earlier ones, or the kids who are really impressionable, you want to get one of the earlier ones. So it scares me a little bit that UNC has that early official with Bodie and then potentially could visit Notre Dame later on in the month. Is a little scary. And there's some other programs that are in there too that could be threatening to North Carolina. Off the top of my head, don't have them.
This is interesting. Official visits. Obviously, there's a rhyme and a reason to how they're doing. You just mentioned that. I know it's case by case. Don't tell me that. We're all day to day. When I see an athlete listed as day to day, I say, aren't we all? My question to you about official visits is first or last or middle, does it matter the most for most prospects? I mean, kids are impressionable, and we've seen guys go on official visits. One weekend they're in Chapel Hill, it's the greatest thing ever. The next weekend they're in Tuscaloosa, and that's the greatest thing ever. And next week they're in Happy Valley, and that was unbelievable. I mean, do schools want to be first or last, or is last usually the spot that most angle for, given obviously case by case basis?
Before I get to your question, so Calhoun also wants to visit Notre Dame, Tennessee, and Virginia Tech. Obviously, Virginia Tech's really close. Tennessee is Tennessee, and then Notre Dame. But all right, so to answer your question, so I think if you don't know anything about the recruit and you got to pick a weekend, you want that last weekend. You want the last at bat. You want to be able to know what all the other programs kind of threw at him, what impressed him. You want to read those stories after the official visits to see what kind of caught his eye, and you want to be able to combat that or take advantage of that information. But not to say, I mean, it is in general, it is case by case. I think this is where you really need to know the recruit and know if they're a guy who's going to take all their officials or if they're a guy who could decide earlier. And so this is where this is kind of the nitty gritty of recruiting that really doesn't get talked about a whole lot. It's a strategy part of it. But like I said, I think most of them, you want that last one, but there are situations for sure where you want an earlier one-ish. Or maybe, I mean, there could be situations where you're like, okay, this kid needs to get this visit out of his system. Let's get the second visit. I mean, I can see scenarios like that also.
Yeah, I mean, if most of the time for these guys, the highest rated recruits obviously are used to it, but most of the time, um, you take the lid off and kid gets an official visit somewhere, and it's something they've never experienced before,
Yeah.
and so that first impression's
Well,
oftentimes a good one.
and then two, some kids don't realize that these official visits are super impressive, super exciting. You get to eat a lot at all of them. So they go in that first one and they're like, whoa, no other school can be like this. Not
Yeah.
realizing that every other school is going to stuff you with food, really, really, really good food. You're going to have, you're going to hang out with some pretty females. You're going to have a great time going to a bunch of college parties with your host. Your parents are going to be blown away by what they show them. They're not going to show them the bad stuff about their academics or their campus. They're going to show them all the good things. So yeah, every official visit is positive. So definitely you want to make sure you take at least more than one.
I never went on an official visit ever in my life, but I was, let's just say, there when some people were taking their official visits back in my college days.
Uh,
It's quite interesting, and that was a long, long time ago. So I'm sure some things I'm sure have stayed the same. Some have probably gotten a little better, a little cleaner, and a little more fancy or whatnot. Don, any other questions about mock before we move on? We're working on, well, let me ask you the question, and this is something that people ask on the message board, so I'll bring it up here, and you've seen I've started in the chat. I'm going to bring it up. I mean, it's sort of an elephant in the room. Has Mac made a decision not to target high profile, high star rating players for some reason? Talking about podcasts, ask that question. That's generally the number one question on the message boards, or where are the 4 and 5 stars on the recruiting boards? Can you just sort of speak to that a little bit in discussing how this class and how these cycles have shaken out?
yeah. So Mac doesn't, no coaching staff goes and uses 24/7 sports rankings or any publicly available rankings to shape their recruiting board. They make their own evaluations. They are definitely aware of the rankings, and to different degrees, they care about the rankings. I have gotten plenty of pushback from different rankings here and there that I'm not even involved with. I don't do anything with, well, I don't do the actual rankings.
Mhm.
I'm more of a lobbyist than anything else. But anyway, um, they do their own evaluations. They have their own criteria. They have, they have their own system on how they do things. They have their own, whose voices are more important than others, sort of thing. And so they definitely would not say, all right, any of these guys are 4 stars or 5 stars. Let's take them off our board. No one does that. That wouldn't make any sense. I think this is probably where NIL stuff might be more of an impact, because to me, and we're still learning a lot about the NIL stuff, and there's not a whole lot of like hard facts. It's a lot of hearsay, a lot of, I heard this person's getting this, they're paying for this, that sort of thing. But I would imagine that the higher you go up the rankings, the more likely that recruit could receive a good amount of money, whether they want to or not. I was reading something about how Arch Manning, his coaches are saying that he does not have an NIL deal. Now, Arch Manning's a very special situation. His family has plenty of money. But I think that the higher up you get in the rankings, the better of a chance that you have at getting some NIL. I don't think a whole lot of people are getting a lot of money, but I don't think as many people that people think are getting money. But I would imagine if you're a 5-star guy, you definitely could demand some money if that's what you wanted to do. And I think, certainly some 4 stars could too also. So that's kind of a factor here. The other thing is, and we've talked about this before, the buzz, the glimmer has kind of wore off a bit, and that's a factor. That's why North Carolina is, a couple years ago, North Carolina went head to head with Clemson for Andre Green, and there were for the latter portion of it, UNC was probably viewed as a leader there. Although, I mean, Clemson definitely gave UNC a run for the money, and it probably wasn't 100% North Carolina to the very end. Now we just talked about Alex Taylor. It's a little bit different, as far as, it certainly feels like Taylor today would probably put Clemson. And some of that is the fact that just the perception of the direction of UNC's program and Clemson's program. I mean, that's what I hear. Now, one of the things that's been brought up on the message boards is Mac's age. And I'm going to be honest, I haven't had anyone bring that up to me. I just haven't. No parents. I mean, typically I'll have a parent if there's an issue. Like when, and I know we don't want to bring up, we're not going to go into detail, but when the NCAA stuff was going on, I had multiple parents say, "Hey, can I talk to you just between you and I?" And I'm like, "All right, sure." And they would ask me, "What am I hearing about the NCAA stuff?" And there's other situations that have happened in North Carolina where I've had a parent or a high school coach kind of talk to me off the record and ask me about. That has not happened to me with Mac Brown. I have not had someone say, "Hey, Mac's getting up there in age. When do you think he's going to leave?" It has not happened to me. So can I say with 100% certainty that it's not a factor? No, but I just don't. I'm not seeing that as a factor. What I'm seeing is on a high level, some of the NIL stuff, and then I think the past 2 seasons, the perception hasn't been that they ended well, regardless of how many wins that were in the win column.
Two interesting points right there. Probably the most interesting points of the entire show there. One, perception, whether or not it's the reality, is the reality
Yeah.
for folks not completely zoned in and dialed in to what's going on. And then you mentioned the age factor. I mean, 70 some is the new 50 some. I know 52 for me is the new 30. At least that's what I tell myself every day. So maybe 70 something is the new 50 something. It's an interesting dynamic. I mean, the bottom line is people are judged on wins and losses, not on recruiting classes. They help and all, but ultimately the judgment comes on wins and losses. Carolina won 9 last year. Carolina needs to win 9 or more, I would wager, this year, to at least keep that perception from becoming, turning down even further. Anyway, fantastic discussion, Don. I'll give you props for bringing up that, because that is one thing we've heard on the message boards a lot, is the age factor. And you would know, folks ask you all the time questions, and nobody's asking about that. So anyway, are we ready for the top 5? It is 10 minutes to 1 on Wednesday, May 10th.
Yeah.
I think I was born like at 2:00 or something. I'm not sure. So it's almost
You sure
technically
you
my
weren't
birthday.
hatched?
Hatched, extricated, dug up, whatever you want to call. I was the third of 3, so I just kind of showed up
So you're the youngest.
by far.
Oh, wow.
10 years younger than.
Oh,
I
okay.
lost one brother, but 10 years younger than my living brother, and I
Mm.
was 11 years younger than my oldest brother. But yeah, so
Wow.
I'm the
Okay.
baby of the bunch. Hard to believe. Anyway, not about me. It's about Don Callahan and the scoop. Don, top 5 actors.
Hey, I want you to keep an eye open for who could be the MVP of this chat.
Well,
Oh.
Buck had it until he mentioned that my hair had seen its day.
Ah.
So
Yeah, so do we want to, I saw that there was one in here, I think.
I might go with a regular, because I think one of the valid questions was this one.
Okay.
I kind of like that
I'm
question.
a big Preston fan. Well, Preston also has a top 5. Do you want to read his first? And if anyone else has a top 5, they need to mention it.
We are talking top 5 actors, and quite frankly, when you hear the word
Oh,
actor,
I see another one. Okay.
when you have top 5 actors that most folks think male actors. It could be female actors. It doesn't matter.
Well, I went male.
You went straight male. So
I
did
went.
I. But I've got some. I mean, Margot
Well,
Robbie is
we
my
could
number
do
one.
we could do we could do actresses.
Well, everybody's an actor now, Don. You need to get with it,
Uh,
brother.
well, I'm
Anyway,
just trying to give more people shine. You know what I mean?
let's go. Preston's top five. And Preston, you're in the shotgun seat for Poster of the Week MVP. But Bruce Willis, shout out to him. That's an awful
Yeah,
disease
going
he's
through some
dealing
stuff.
with.
Yeah.
Will Ferrell, sometimes. Peter Sellers. I'm gonna show my ignorance. Who is that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that too.
All right, Clint Eastwood. Yeah, one of my favorite Clint Eastwood lines, and I'm paraphrasing from Unforgiven. Anybody that don't want to die better just head on out back. That's a great line in the movie. And then Ross's dad on his honeymoon tape. I just threw up my mouth a little bit. So we're going to skip over that one. All right, top five. Give me yours.
Well, there's one more. I saw one more.
Okay, yeah, there
Sean.
it is.
Yeah.
Sean Crowley goes Nicholson, Gene Hackman, Clint Eastwood, Morgan Freeman, and Robert De Niro.
All right. So you want my five?
Yep.
Or you want to get yours first?
You can do yours. We can do
All
them
right.
together.
All right. So starting with number 5, I went Johnny Depp. 4, Leonardo DiCaprio. 3, Samuel L. Jackson, who's actually my personal all-time favorite. But I put him 3 because I feel like these other 2 actors are better actors. Number 2, Bryan Cranston, and number 1, Tom Hanks. I think Tom Hanks is absolutely amazing. He literally every movie he makes you forget he's Tom Hanks in that movie. Every single movie I've ever seen him, and even the most boring plots. Like if you think about Castaway, that's a boring ass plot.
That movie was great.
That movie was great, and it was great because of him.
That's accurate.
Yeah.
You almost make me want to change some of mine. And the ridiculous, we could have done top 10.
That's why we got to do actors, actresses. We could do actresses next week if we want.
So I'm going to go, I guess I got to do them in order. And this is a shout out to Mac if you're listening, or the other people up there if you're listening. Matthew McConaughey is my number 1.
Okay.
Love that dude.
All
and
right.
I would love to have him on this podcast to talk about Mac and Texas football and Carolina, any of that stuff. And of course, Mac
make it happen.
And Jack Ingram and McConaughey had their fundraising thing a couple of weeks ago, which was pretty cool. Folks can go check that out and see what that was all about. But I just finished up True Detective, watching that again with my youngest son. He wanted to watch it. Just awesome. And then, you got Dazed and Confused. You got Mud, which is one of my personal favorite movies. Dallas Buyers Club, any of those type.
Dallas Buyers
movies.
Club is really good, and he had to lose a lot of weight for that, which blows my mind. But
yeah, and then some of the other stuff. There's some cute rom-coms on there that he's done and all. But I mean, I could go on and on about that guy. He's one of my man crushes. Johnny Depp is another one of my man crushes.
Yeah,
he is. Of course, I love pirates. You can't see the wall, but it's a pirate theme in here.
Well, the cool thing about him too.
There you go, Blackbeard. See,
the cool thing about him is that he studied silent films because he felt like that was true actors, where you didn't have to get across what you're trying to get across through words. You could just through your facial expression. I think that's amazing. And plus, he's one of those nutso people who is kind of like just a genius sort of thing.
Yeah, I think you got to be a little weird.
Yes,
you got to be a little weird to be an actor. And then I'm gonna go Denzel.
Okay.
I mean, unbelievable. One of the best Denzel movies I've seen, and it's off the radar, is Fences. And we were talking about baseball movies. I guess technically that's a baseball movie. Just a great movie, and of course all the rest. And then if you want to go straight, testosterone, you go Training Day with him.
Yeah.
But just a ton of things. Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to get busy living or get busy dying, Don. You got to do one or the other. And it's crazy to me how so many people hadn't seen that movie. And then I was kind of torn on a fifth one. People mentioned Clint Eastwood. He's up there. Robert De Niro. He's up there. And I'm blanking on who my fifth one actually was right at the moment because I didn't write them down. But the bottom line is,
was it Tom Hanks?
No, but you make a good call. Good.
De Niro
Like,
was my first one out. I really like De Niro,
yeah, but I mean,
but I feel like he plays the same part. But I mean, he does a good job with it. But
yeah, and Pacino, Advocate's Devil or Devil's Advocate, one of my favorite movies ever.
yeah,
So many great lines. I'll tell you a sneaky good actor that I liked, and he wasn't not in a movie, but in series for me was Justified, and that's Oliphant. Have you ever watched Justified? I
I
asked
have
you that
not.
before.
No, you have
Man,
not. Justify. What is it? Tell me about it.
it is a
I'm writing it
series.
down.
Maybe it's on Prime or it's on one of the things. It's several years. He's a U.S. Marshal
Okay.
um, who lives on the edge of whatever, and the writing, and it's in BFE, Kentucky, set down in the hollers and all that stuff, and the writing and the hillbilliness and the countryness. It is fabulous, and he is hilarious. And
So is it what is it a drama or is it a comedy? What is it?
it's funny, but it's drama, law
Okay.
enforcement, and all that kind of stuff. And then Preston mentioned Deadwood. I haven't watched it. I need to
So
watch it, but
yeah,
yeah.
so I did. I watched the first season of Deadwood. The I like it, but the hard thing is they use very I don't know if broken English is the word, but like you almost need it's all English, but because they talk so
See, I'm from down
uneducatedly.
here, though. I'm down. I'm from around here. You know.
Well, I need subtitles, but I have Justified down. I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna get it, and I'm gonna judge you, Tommy. If you come through, then I'm going to definitely be asking you for more recommendations. But if you fail me, then
Well, it is fabulous to
okay.
me, and it's like everything else. Some series or some seasons are better than others, but I mean, it is hilarious. And look, if you had trouble with Deadwood, you probably going. There's some. I don't want to say, you know, what they call us down here, but there's some hillbillies down there on that show, and it is so funny to me. But yeah, Denzel, Morgan Freeman, of course, Pillars, Johnny Depp, Matthew McConaughey have always been my favorites. I mean, you name Tom Hanks, who's probably one of the best of our time. I
Yeah,
mean, your point, and this is one of the best points you've made since I've been talking to you, and this is not just podcast wise, is that he makes you forget that it's Tom Hanks.
yeah.
And that's
I
a
mean,
pretty awesome
yeah.
compliment
I mean,
for an actor.
everything. I mean, I will. There was a couple new ones that came out that I'm gonna. Oh, the what is it? All Man Came Auto, which seems stupid, but I'm gonna watch it just because Tom Hanks is good and everything. Um, but like even that Mister Rogers movie,
Yeah,
he was awesome. You know, so
I haven't watched that one because I can only think of Mr. Robinson and Eddie Murphy on Saturday Night Live. So anyway, anything left on? We're easing up on the 1 o'clock hour. We need to let folks get back to work here on a Wednesday.
no, just I wish what's his name, Alan would have came in. You know, collected his
His
imaginary
flowers.
MVP, his imaginary MVP award. We could gave it to him or give it to him. But it is what it is.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun time as you and I talk about this. Top 5 actresses next week or top 5 uh, streaming series next week? Where do you want to go?
Let's do streaming series.
Okay, top 5 streaming series, folks. Hit us up on the
We're
message
probably gonna
board.
need a definition, but we can figure that out for
It's
next
got
week.
to have more than one season.
But do you consider like Breaking Bad is that streaming? Because that was actually on AMC
Yeah,
first.
I would count. I would count Breaking Bad. I'd count The Wire.
Okay.
I'd count, Walking Dead if that's your thing.
Okay.
Any of those. Justified if that's your thing. So yeah, it's just the rule is it has to be more than one season, and it streaming at some point. So
Okay. All right.
we'll do it. That'll be on May 17th at noon on Wednesday. Last thing before we go, next week's show will be Noon Dish with
Noon
Don.
dish with Don
Noon
and
Dish with
Tommy.
Don Callahan.
And
Nope, it's not
Tommy.
about me. It's going to be Noon Dish. So we're going to go from dessert with the scoops to the main course for your Noon Dish on Inside Carolina and InsideCarolina.com. Check us out there. Shout out to everybody that's been here. Shout out to Buck Sanders for joining us. Buck, good to see you in here. Need to get on the golf course again.
Buck is making sure that we're doing our job, that we're not just
Hey,
turning it on and going to sleep.
I love that guy. He is it was a blast playing golf with him and that crowd several weeks ago. Need to do it again. But that'll do it for this episode. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Check out the message boards. Check out Don's mock class 1.0 on the Tar Pit Premium message board. And as always, rate us, review, like, subscribe, whatever. I want feedback. If you like the show, tell us about it. If you like portions or none, tell us about it. Let us know what you want to hear, and we'll get it done, folks. That's what we do. We aim to please on Wednesdays at noon with the noon dish. Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Tommy.